Every year, a player comes out of nowhere and seems to take the NFL by storm. Whether that's as a result of a previous player leaving their team, or a player getting a fresh opportunity following a player getting injured, or if that's the result of a player finally figuring things out as they go into another season in the NFL. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here, and today we're going to be discussing each and every NFL team's most likely breakout candidate. Now, before we get to the content, I wanted to remind you guys that we're giving away a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X to a subscriber that turns on our notifications on this channel, and of course we're going to be announcing the winner on our community tab. If you could also leave a like on this video. Typically Roger Goodell likes to claim my content, and well, I tend to make these videos for you guys for free, and if you guys want to support me, you could join our membership program, but that's not expected. Just leave a like on the video to push this channel out in the algorithm. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mike Check 1212. For the Atlanta Falcons, their most likely breakout player is going to be Calvin Ridley. And the reason for this is fairly obvious. The Atlanta Falcons underwent a huge transformation over this past year when they moved on from Julio Jones, trading him to the Tennessee Titans, which means the new de facto #1 wide receiver in Atlanta is going to be Calvin Ridley. Of course, they did recently draft Kyle Pitts with the #4 overall pick, so things are going to look really interesting in Atlanta this year. Now, it's kind of weird saying a player that went for over 1,300 yards receiving last year is going to break out this year, but it should give you an idea of how terrifying Calvin Ridley might be this year now that he's the full-time #1 wide receiver. Now, for the Baltimore Ravens, we have J.K. Dobbins as the most likely breakout candidate. This is as a result of Mark Ingram finally leaving town, and honestly, J.K. Dobbins has shown off a tremendous ability in his limited time playing for the Baltimore Ravens. In 134 carries, J.K. Dobbins rushed for a very efficient 805 yards and 9 touchdowns last year for an absurd 6 yards per carry average. Typically, halfbacks in the Greg Roman offense tend to eat, so expect J.K. Dobbins to do the same in his sophomore season. For the Carolina Panthers, there's a lot of defensive players that I wanted to give this title to, but we're going to have to say Sam Darnold. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with Sam Darnold now that he has a head coach that, first of all, believes in him, and second of all, actually knows how to run a game plan. Of course, the Carolina Panthers are rebuilding, but Matt Rule showed me that he was a very capable head coach during his time game planning with Teddy Bridgewater, and I'm excited to see what he can do with Sam Darnold because it would really be nice to see another USC quarterback pan out, and that's despite me going to UCLA as my alma mater. For the Chicago Bears, they have undergone some crazy offensive transformations, but I think the most likely player to break out on this team is actually going to be on the defensive end, and that's Jaylon Johnson. So Jaylon Johnson was drafted with a second-round pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, and he wasn't really the greatest as a rookie. He allowed an opposing passer rating of 107.5, but again, being a cornerback in the NFL is definitely one of the more challenging positions to pick up, and now that Kyle Fuller is gone, Jaylon Johnson is going to be thrusted in that #1 cornerback role. Of course, he's going to have help in the form of Roquan Smith and Khalil Mack in the pass rush, so I'd expect him to at least take a step forward this year. For the Cincinnati Bengals, since he was injured last year, I'd like to say that Joe Burrow is the most likely to break out this year. Now, the only thing that could potentially ruin any chance for Joe Burrow to take the next step is if the fact that the Cincinnati Bengals elected to draft Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell comes back to haunt them. But Joe Burrow did a remarkable job until he got injured last year, forming a tremendous rapport with T. Higgins, and now that he has his old buddy from LSU, Jamar Chase, on his team, expect him to take the next step forward, unless of course someone destroys him from his blind side. For the Cleveland Browns, our most likely breakout candidate is Ronnie Harrison. Now, the Cleveland Browns really focused on the defensive side of the ball this past year, signing Jadeveon Clowney, and of course, signing John Johnson, which is another safety to pair with Ronnie Harrison. Bear in mind, the Browns like running a lot of 3 safety defenses, which should allow Ronnie Harrison to play both deep and in the box during his time with the Cleveland Browns rounds this year. For the Dallas Cowboys, there are a ton of players that I could say for this year's Hard Knocks team, and of course my favorite NFL team that causes me a tremendous amount of pain each and every year. But I think my most likely breakout candidate for the Dallas Cowboys is none other than CeeDee Lamb. He's been absolutely crushing it in training camp this past year, and now that Dak Prescott is back and fully healthy and there's no pandemic offseason to hinder them, hopefully a rapport built during training camp would translate into significant progress throughout the regular season. CeeDee Lamb was considered to be the top wide receiver prospect in a loaded wide receiver draft during the 2020 NFL draft, and the fact that he is going to be flanked by Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup should result in some nice wide open looks for him to capitalize upon. For the Denver Broncos, I have Noah Fant as the most likely breakout candidate. Now, the problem with Noah Fant throughout his entire career has been the fact that he hasn't really been the most consistent on the Denver Broncos, but that could also be a testament from having an inconsistent quarterback in Drew Lock. This year, Noah Fant will either have Drew Lock as his quarterback or Teddy Bridgewater, and once his quarterback situation stabilizes, hopefully you'll see more consistency out of Noah Fant this year. For the Detroit Lions, I have DeAndre Swift as the most likely breakout candidate, and honestly, this is just as a result of the Detroit Lions not really having many other playmakers on their team after they thrusted themselves into a rebuild by letting Kenny Golladay go ahead and sign with the New York Giants, and of course, trading away Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff. Expect a lot of checkdowns to DeAndre Swift. As a matter of fact, if you're in a PPR fantasy league, I highly recommend you pick this guy up. For the Green Bay Packers, A.J. Dillon might be the most likely breakout candidate this year. This picture of A.J. Dillon's quads took the entire NFL world by storm, and now that Jamal Williams is off the team, it will finally give him an opportunity to shine this year. Of course, he's probably going to have to play second fiddle to Aaron Jones, but nevertheless, you should see an increased role for A.J. Dillon. For the Houston Texans, I think their most likely breakout candidate is going to be Charles Omenihu, and the reason for that being, now that J.J. Watt is gone, the Houston Texans are going to need someone to step up on that defensive line if they want any chance of being even the slightest bit better than they were last year. For the Indianapolis Colts, probably my favorite wide receiver on this list, despite me mentioning CeeDee Lamb on the Dallas Cowboys, who's my favorite team, is Michael Pittman Jr. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. showed tremendous promise in an injury-shortened year, and I predict him performing even better now that he has Carson Wentz as his brand new quarterback. I think really highly of the Carson Wentz trade to the Indianapolis Colts, and I feel like between him, Carson Wentz, and Frank Reich, they're going to figure out a way to get the ball in his hands, and you could potentially see a 1,000-yard season from Michael Pittman Jr. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, my breakout candidate this year is Tim Tebow. No, I'm just kidding. It's going to be Laviska Shenault, and this one's very simple. You have a remarkable quarterback prospect coming in Trevor Lawrence. Each and every wide receiver is probably going to see a decent bump in terms of production, and I absolutely loved Laviska Shenault coming out of the draft last year, and I expect him to take a step forward this year. For the Kansas City Chiefs, my most likely breakout candidate, and I think this is a player that I actually thought was going to break out last year, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde had a very pedestrian rookie season, but of course, that was his rookie season. I expect running backs in a Andy Reid offense to always potentially eat, and make this year no different. Hopefully, the fact that he didn't have to go through a pandemic training camp would result in Clyde Edwards-Helaire taking a step forward, and now that Andy Reid knows what he has in Clyde, maybe, just maybe, there were more plays designed for Clyde Edwards-Helaire to succeed. For the Las Vegas Raiders, yet another wide receiver that was part of that extremely deep 2020 NFL draft class, Bryan Edwards, is my most likely to break out. Now, a lot of us thought that Bryan Edwards may surprise a lot of us last year, but unfortunately, he didn't get a lot of playing time. But hopefully this year, this big-bodied wide receiver, 6'3", 212 pounds, a physical specimen, will see an enhanced role role next to the likes of Henry Ruggs, and maybe he could take up the target share of Jared Cook. That's before we even mention that Nelson Aguilar also departed in free agency, so all signs are pointing towards a hopefully healthy Bryan Edwards taking a huge leap this year. For the LA Chargers, I have 2019 second-round pick Nasir Adderley as their most likely breakout candidate. When you look at the LA Chargers defense, there isn't a single hole in that defense. The only thing that's really going to stop them is probably injuries. In 2020, Nasir Adderley finished with 69 tackles, 3 passes defended, and an interception. And now that they're getting Derwin James back alongside Joey Bosa and a ferocious LA Chargers pass rush, I expect Nasir Adderley to absolutely crush it in a defensive back unit that features himself, Derwin James, Chris Harris Jr., Mike Davis, and exciting young rookie Asante Samuel Jr. For the LA Rams, I think this is probably the player that I'm most uncomfortable adding to this list, but I feel like I have no choice as a result of the recent injury in my original breakout candidate. I'm going to have to add Darrell Henderson as the most likely to break out. Now, the reason being because the LA Rams last year had Cam Akers, Malcolm Brown, and Darrell Henderson Jr. And Malcolm Brown was gone via free agency. Cam Akers ruptured his Achilles, unfortunately. That just leaves Darrell Henderson. And it seems like the LA Rams aren't going to be targeting another running back. Maybe they bring on Le'Veon Bell, but they're not showing any signs of doing so. So, not really comfortable with this pick, but he is going to be the starting running back for Sean McVay and the LA Rams. And if he doesn't succeed for the LA Rams, then, well, the LA Rams are possibly going to be screwed because they're very overly reliant on the run game. For the Miami Dolphins, I have Tua Tagovailoa this year as their breakout candidate. Now, last year, Tua didn't really look the greatest in his debut, going 6 of 3 as a starter, but really looking like a below average game manager. While this year, the Miami Dolphins signed Will Fuller, drafted his former teammate Jalen Waddle, and signed the aforementioned Malcolm Brown to help improve the ground game. I've seen quarterbacks have to overcome more than Tua has to overcome, so I'm predicting him taking the next leap forward. Now, for the Minnesota Vikings, their biggest breakout player is going to be Irv Smith Jr., and this is just simply because Kyle Rudolph is no longer with the Minnesota Vikings, and of course, last year, Irv Smith played 50% of Minnesota's offensive snaps with Kyle Rudolph on the roster. Now that Rudolph is gone, you could expect that number to go up significantly higher. For the New England Patriots, I have Damien Harris as the most likely breakout candidate, especially if Cam Newton is going to be the starting QB this year. Now, if you remember, there was a specific point towards the end of the season last year where Damien Harris completely took over as the New England Patriots leading rusher. Now, he did only play in 10 games last year, but he does appear to be the best in that New England Patriots backfield. And apparently, he's absolutely remarkable during offseason workouts, and Bill Belichick has been speaking of him glowingly. For the New Orleans Saints, I have Adam Trautman, their tight end, as they're most likely to break out this year. I know a lot of you guys might be mad that it's not Jameis Winston, but I feel like Jameis Winston was a little bit too lazy of a pick here. Adam Trautman's going to be the tight end for the New Orleans Saints this year, and last year Jared Cook absolutely dominated in that position with 7 touchdowns. If it's not Adam Trautman that's going to step up, well, you should expect Traquan Smith to take the next step. For the New York Giants, I have their safety Xavier McKinney taking the next step and breaking out this year, and hopefully will continue to stay healthy throughout this entire season. He showed a tremendous ability in coverage when he did play, and with a full healthy offseason to learn, Xavier McKinney should be a great contributor in a New York Giants defense that is absolutely undergoing a cultural shift under second-year head coach Joe Judge. For the New York Jets, their most likely breakout candidate is going to be Quinnen Williams, and this one just was a home run pick for me. You have Bob Saleh coming in, who was a remarkable defensive mind when he was with the San Francisco 49ers. He gets a former top 3 pick in Quinnen Williams to work with as his defensive tackle. I expect tremendous results between these two as a result of it. For the Philadelphia Eagles, my most likely breakout candidate is going to be Jalen Hurts, and I really hope for their sake this breakout actually comes true. Jalen Hurts does get a brand new weapon in Devontae Smith this year and gets a full offseason with the head coach coach that believes in him, although isn't really the greatest press conference interviewee. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, I have right tackle Zach Banner breaking out this year as a result of several offensive line changes for the Pittsburgh Steelers involving losing David DeCastro and seeing the retirement of Marquise Pouncey. He was unfortunately out due to a knee injury last year, but this is a make or break season for Zach Banner as he really doesn't have a lot of tape to support him thus far. This is more of a shot in the dark type of pick from me. For the San Francisco 49ers, their biggest breakout candidate, in my opinion, is going to be Brandon Ayuk, who showed a remarkable talent and ability during his limited time with the San Francisco 49ers last year. Brandon Ayuk showed tremendous yak playmaking ability and is a home run threat no matter who's throwing him the ball, whether that's Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. Expect Brandon Ayuk to come down with some home run plays in Kyle Shanahan's offense. For the Seattle Seahawks, my biggest breakout candidate is Quandre Diggs, who was an absolute stud as a free safety. Quandre Diggs is probably the most versatile safety in the entire NFL and is probably one of the most underrated players in the NFL. He can line up all over the defensive backfield and had 5 interceptions last year. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, this is a really tough one because it's like this is the defending Super Bowl champions and for the most part they all broke out. I'm just going to say Scotty Miller has a great opportunity to break out this year. Last year he showed a tremendous rapport with Tom Brady, and whenever you're one of Tom Brady's wide receivers, there's a chance that he's going to make a good name for you. Just look at players like Julian Edelman and Wes Welker in years past. For the Tennessee Titans, we have Jonnu Smith's replacement, Anthony Firkser, as the most likely breakout candidate. This one's very simple. Jonnu Smith is now on the New England Patriots. Someone's going to have to take up his snaps, and the most likely to do that is Anthony Firkser. Now, for the Washington football team, I have a player that they said that they were so excited about that they decided to move on from Adrian Peterson last year, and that's Antonio Gibson. Antonio Gibson had an awesome 4.7 yards per carry average last year for 800 yards and 11 touchdowns, and I'm expecting him to build off of that incredible rookie season this year. And those are our breakout candidates for this season. Let me know in the comment section down below if you think I'm missing anyone. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.